Greetings to all Africans on the continent and across the world. This is King Eju, the radical Pan-African activist from Ambazonia, aka Ambas Bay. Today's discussion is connected to Pan-Africanism. And what is Pan-Africanism? Pan-Africanism is basically for us, pretty much. But Pan-Africanism is political, it's philosophical, spiritual, and economical. And it's something that we must do for us as Africans. Although the trend of the Nigerian election is in the air in Africa, our discussion of today has to do with Tunisia, the North African country. You know what has happened in Tunisia and how blacks are being treated in Tunisia. But let me ask you something, Africans. Have you ever thought of why black peoples are being treated in North African countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, Libya, and the rest? Have you ever thought about why Africans are being treated badly, poorly, inhumanly in Middle Eastern countries or so-called Arab African countries? And how did this creation of the Arab African countries began in the first place? Has Africans thought about why it happened? Because there's something that we always focus ourselves on, which has to do with the Atlantic slave trade and how blacks were colonized and taken away out of Africa into other worlds, in other nations. We concentrate on that, but we don't think about the slave trade in North Africa and why the North African region became Arab African countries. So let's talk about, we talk about Atlantic slave trade, but because Africans were enslaved by Westerners, and Africans don't talk much about the Arab slave trade in Africa. What is the Arab slave trade? The Arab slave trade started before the Atlantic slave trade, but we spend a lot of time talking about the Atlantic slave trade and colonization. But we forgot about the fact that the Arab slave trade also colonized African people and also took a lot of land area in the continent of Africa known as North Africa. In the Arab slave trade, you had Tunisian slave trade, Libya slave trade, you had Sudan slave trade, you had Mauritania slave trade, you had the Trans-Sahara slave trade, which involved a lot of African people affected. Do you know that there are a lot of black people outside of the continent of Africa in the Middle East? But you don't realize that. Not just the ones who are moving into Middle Eastern countries, but the ones who have been there that were brought in Middle Eastern nations during the Arab slave trade. Many Africans that were dehumanized. And this is why it is okay for Tunisians to do what they do to Africans, because it's something that they have done for so long. It's something that is part of their own humanity that is different from African humanity. You see, in Middle Eastern countries and in Arab African countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, as a matter of fact, Kevin Hart made a statement about Egypt that Egypt was a black African country that Arabs took over. Because of that statement, he was banned from having a show in Egypt. This is how racist Egypt is. This is how racist North African countries are. Because of the Arab slave trade, they don't see Africans as significant humans. They see Africans as people they can react to when they're angry, when they are pissed off about the economic crisis stemmed from their leaders. They take it upon themselves to attack Africans and kill Africans and maim Africans and destroy Africans because they don't see the humanity of African people. And this is not a phenomenon that is known only in North African countries. This is a phenomenon that is known across the globe because the humanity of black people is seen as insignificant globally. It gives you it explains why a white couple kill a black unarmed citizen, because they don't see the humanity of black people. Explains why Arabs in Tunisia could do what they do to African people, why Morocco could do what they do to African people, why Egypt will do what they do to African people, why North Africa and why Middle Eastern nations will do what they do to African people. The modern day slavery. Because it's something they have been doing for generations. It's something that is part of their own humanity to dehumanize African people. It makes it easier for them to do because they don't see us as human beings. And this phenomenon will continue, will not stop. Because this is something that is intergenerational. The crisis in Tunisia is political. But what did the president of Tunisia do? Spin it to blame Africans. And why did Tunisians take upon themselves to attack and beat up and kill Africans? Because it's in their genetic makeup, it's in their humanity to do that. It's something that they have been doing for generations. It's something that they did in the past, and it's something that they will do in the future. But Africans don't want to understand that the humanity of Arabs is different from the humanity of black Africans. The humanity of white is different from the humanity of Africans globally. Which is why we as black people, as African, are below in the spectrum of humanity to other human race in the world. The reason why China could do what they do to Africans is because they don't see our humanity. The reason why Tunisia could do what they did to Africans because they don't see the black humanity as significant. It's because they don't give a damn about our humanity. Modern day slavery happens in many Middle Eastern countries where you see an Arab would just push down a black person from a building just because of whatever reason and kill the human being. Kill the black human being because they don't care about the humanity. This is something that happens in many Arab nations. And this is something that happened in Tunisia, something that happened in Egypt, it's something that happened in Morocco. In North Africa, it happens because North Africans are Arabs. And they don't give a damn about the humanity of black people. Just like the world doesn't give a damn about the humanity of black people. But you know, was not long ago when the African Union had a summit, a 2-day summit, and the discussion of the Agenda 2063 to implement, um, you know, doing businesses across the 54 or 55 African countries. They didn't look into the reaction of what would happen when they tried to implement Agenda 2063. Agenda 2063 is a good agenda. But in anything you do, there's always an opposite reaction. And African Union has not understood the opposite reaction. That agenda that was discussed a couple of, maybe a month ago or so, weeks or so, by the African Union to implement this system, to implement Agenda 2063. Many African leaders who have been there in power for so long and don't want to give power, want to stay in power, will find ways to make the implementation of Agenda 2063 difficult. You know, in the discussion of the African Union, what they mostly concentrated on was leaders in Mali, in Sudan, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea. Those leaders who took power through military coup because of African leaders who have been there for so long and don't want to give power, and it's not doing much to help the circumstances in those prospective countries. So military coup took over and took power. But that the African Union sees that as bad. Meanwhile, they don't see the reason why this happened in the first place. Because of bad leadership. When you have bad leadership, when you have leaders who've been there for 10, 20, 30 years in power and don't want to step down and aren't doing much to help the situations in the countries in Africa, you have coups, successful coups. Instead of working with those leaders so that a better system can be set to eliminate coups, where leaders pass power, not just sit in power. If you have a leader that's been in president for 10, 20, 30, and he's only trying to stay more years in powers, that's already a coup. That's already a coup. And because it's already cool, the situation will allow the growth of more coups to happen. So the president of Tunisia is trying to stay in power. And he's doing everything possible. And that's just one country. Many other countries will do the same thing or similar things to stay in power. But the African Union must make sure that leadership pass power to the next leadership. If there's no successful and smooth transition of power, stuff like what is happening in Tunisia or in other part of Africa will continue. When you have leaders who have been there for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years and don't want to pass leadership, the growth for Agenda 2063 will be impossible to implement, and there will be more problems than solutions. Africa needs to wake up and see the truth, because the world is changing and changing fast. Running out of Africa is not the best solution to what is going on around the world, because no matter where we are as Africans, we are always looked down upon in the aspect of our humanity. The world does not see black people as vital people, as significant people, as people that needs to be seen or treated as humans. They always look down upon us, and they'll always treat us as insignificant. The problem in Tunisia is the same. Arabs are used to their slavery, and they will find other means to continue their modern day slavery. Things they did in the past, they will continue to do because they don't give a damn about black humanity. The world does not give a damn about black humanity. But Africans must give a damn about their own humanity and fight against any other race that does not see our humanity as important. This is King H. Till next time.